Hello and welcome back. This time I want to show you a little bit about the tabletop war games and the army that I prepared for that. So I don't want to go too much into the history of wargaming, but usually it is agreed upon that the Germans came up with a workable kind of simulation style game in the 1800s. First a guy named Helbig, and then the other one, the famous one, would be Reiswitz. And due to modern developments in map design and how maps are and how realistic and in scale they were at some point, that allowed to develop the game itself, or a simulation of war or a campaign. So they developed a system how to deal with terrain, with distance and speed of marching speed of units and things like that. So all that was developed, and it could be played on different scales of maps. And that, was developed in the 1800s. And it is said that the German general staff actually used that to prepare for war, for example, in 1870 against the French, with some success. And that being more like the military version of a game that developed later into the tabletop games as we have them today. So here we have one of the two major ways to represent a wargame. This one is World in Flames, and it is the representation of the Second World War entirely and globally. As you can see, the units are these little cardboard pieces, and they have a lot of information already printed, like they are armored or infantry units. There are special troops like mountain or paratroops, and you see there's some fleet, some naval units, air force and so forth, are all represented by these little cardboard pieces, and they already have a lot of information printed. Like the white prints have a better quality in case they are out of supply compared to the black printed. You have the different nations, different types of units, and all of that is already like baked into the playing pieces, which means you do have to learn a little bit more what all these symbols and things actually mean and what how to use them, but you don't have to look it up in tables or books or anything. And the same is with the map. As you can see, there is divided into all these little hexagonal fields, and that allows for positioning, for measurement. Like the units have printed their movement allowances, the smaller number usually. It's you can move like 4 hexes with an infantry unit, for example. In winter, which has to be decided by dice rolls, that is like halved, or there are subtractions to that movement allowance. But the point is, you don't have to measure anything. It is already included in the map, the way it is built. So that is one way to represent the whole thing. And of course you can have a global map. Like this one has 2 maps, one representing the Asian theater of war, the other one the European, up to far and deep into Russia and Northern Africa. And if you would like to build that as a model for miniatures, as we would see in the next example, try to build the world in your garden. That is probably not so easy to put on a desktop, on a table, or on the kitchen floor. So this allows for a different scale. So from the high end, the global warfare simulation like World in Flames and others would be, this is one model represents one person or monster or spirit or I don't know what. The small scale, as far as unit size is concerned, you have much better models. Obviously, they are gorgeous. No, they could be. I painted them, so they are not as good as they can, but some people just make masterpieces out of those models. And you have everything that you might expect in some real world. This one being Warhammer, so it's a lot of fantastic worlds, sometimes based in other planets, other star systems, I don't know what, science fiction stuff. Anyway, one model usually represents one person or monster, and you can have, as you see here, all sorts of buildings, obstacles, vehicles, whatever, usually representing exactly what they look like. A building is a building, a tank is a tank, one soldier is one soldier, and then you have to fight it out on that scale. So that would not work on a global war. If you would like to have the Second World War with this kind of miniatures, good luck with that. You would need several football fields filled with models, I would think. So it's more like what you could call a skirmish size. Maybe you can have hundreds of models on the table, but even that might be a little bit unwieldy to move all those. So it allows for realism, or fantasy in this case. And there are a lot of other game systems, like, I don't know, Bolt Action or something, that represent the Second World War, and it's in that perspective much more realistic compared to Warhammer, where you are in the very far future, where, as we all know, there is only war. So what is not included on this battlefield scene here is the information. All the stuff that you might need to play the game, to resolve any kind of movement or combat or whatever. All the properties of these units have to be looked up in tables and books. So you would need the rule book, and usually one, if not two, books for the units or the faction that you are playing, be that, I don't know, the Khorne Warriors or the Space Marines or whoever. So you have to look up all that, and you have these information cards that represent a certain type of unit. So if you have, I don't know, this huge tank or a simple marine, no matter what, you have to look up what this unit can do. The movement allowance, the weapons. The floor is terrible here. So all the properties that these units have, what type of weapon, what range, the rate of fire, what damage they do and whatnot. Everything has to be looked up and has to come from books or these data sheets that you would have for all those units. There is nothing printed on the table, as you can see, so distance has to be measured out with tape measures or something like that. So it's much more realistic from the looks of it, and you have these nice models, but you need to measure and run around with your tapes and dice, and you have to pick up all the information from somewhere else, and it's not like we saw in World of Flames printed on the model already. Nice looking, but it needs a lot of paperwork in the background to actually operate that. Finally, we come back to the topic at hand, the miniature wargaming that I actually started building the armies for. In this case, it is the Civil War unit, as you might remember if you watched the first video about that. So we have some Union troops here, some Confederates, and we do have a map or a tabletop representing the landscape here. And still, as you can see, no information included anyhow, so you still have to look up in rules and tables and whatnot to figure out how these units interact with each other. And as for unit sizes, is a little bit more of a of a hybrid system, you might say, compared to the two others that we looked at. Here we have units that represent large units like battalions. You have, what do I have on the stands here? Like, I don't know, 20, not even that, like 12 people here. Where are you guys? So we have one unit representing a battalion, and that is like, here we have 12 models, and that is roughly one battalion size. And then you can have several of those stands to actually form regiments or even brigades and things like that. So that is the meaning of that, and you usually have somebody who's in charge, waving with flags. And so here we have a few Union troops, and yeah, they can just be used the way I have them now. They're on those stands, and then it depends a little bit on the rule set and the game mechanics that you use. If you need large units and smaller ones, some people have that. Other people are just saying, okay, battalion or brigade is just like that, so no matter how many soldiers or models are actually included, that depends on the scale of the game system usually. Either way, you can have them in all sizes if you like, and just say, okay, this is one, I don't know, battalion or an entire brigade or whatever the scale is. But usually it's the idea of many of those game systems is usually like having a scale of one model represents 20 men in real life. Still, you do need the gaming system, you need the rules, the setup, and all those things to actually play. But you can play on a landscape, and you do have all the features that you like. You can build rivers. I have just black rivers because lazy. But you can have buildings, trees, all that stuff. So to build up a battlefield that actually represents the real battlefield, if you do have the space for that. And you can replay historic battles on more or less a table that looks like the battlefield looked at the time. So here we have some of the others, Confederate troops. And here you see the same. I have some units that are kind of tightly packed, and others that have just 5 or 6 models on each stand. So in case game rules ask for smaller units or weaker units or anything, you can represent those with, well, the smaller units. Or you just say, well, those are my skirmishers, if those rules are included or whatnot. So I try to keep it kind of flexible and say, okay, I can use like even these guys here as an entire brigade, and just not so many people on it. Looks nice or not, whatever. Or I can use those as larger and smaller units if that is needed in the game systems. And I saw somebody commented on the last video that these plastic miniatures that I use are kind of, not the best choice to do, because they are very flexible, they are very soft, and so you can touch them once or twice, bend something. That's not a problem to bend, like something like the rifles or anything, but usually the paint comes off very quickly, which is absolutely true, especially if we would see later, if you have those guys with very long rifles and the bayonets on top of that and so forth. It's very easy to touch them wrong, bend them, and then the entire paint job is done. The saving grace here is the factor that they are put on the stands, that you can just, take the entire stand, which is in my case small pieces of thin plywood, Or you have the plastic bases like the Warhammer models have, things like that. That allows you to just move the entire unit without touching the individual models, and thus that problem should be at least very much reduced. But yeah, they are very soft, you can bend them and whatnot, and then you would lose your paint job. That is absolutely true. And you might have noticed that some of those models still don't have any stuff on their feet, like the base is not covered with any kind of flocking and there are no details. Some already have some bushes and some pieces of wood, like a broken fence or anything. So I'm planning on continuing improving the units, but yeah, you could use them just as they are. Like, where are you? There's a general here, and he is just standing on a bare piece of wood, and you can still see the wood glue around his feet, so that needs some flocking, obviously. But yeah, I can do that piece by piece and add details if I am in the mood for model building, but I can use the models the way they are right now just as well. And as I said before, it's not about making very beautiful models, it's to get some play pieces on the table. That is the whole idea behind that. And yeah, well, I can use them the way they are. They could be prettier, of course, but if I wanted to make really nice models and yeah, then I would probably continue with the ships, which I would actually do sooner or later, or use the Warhammer models or things like that, like in a larger scale, to have like really nice detailed stuff and things that I can actually handle. So these miniatures, the ones that I use here, it's like borderline for me to get a decent paint job on those small figures. But yeah, they are meant to be play pieces, and it's fine the way they are right now. And somebody asked about the houses, so I'm not sure if I have any footage of how I actually build them, but they are laser cut, so you just take out all the pieces and can actually just stick them together if you want to. Of course, it's better to use glue, but it's not necessary, and if you want to like take them apart, you don't need to glue them actually. Just have a look at the house here, and this is actually just cardboard, the roof, and more cardboard on the roof. And as you can see, just because it is standing here, it's already very bent, so I'm still thinking of how to improve that. And here is the roof for the front, and some pieces like this. That's actually what the whole thing is built out of. And then you just stick it together, glue it or not, and paint it if you want to have it a little bit more colorful. And you can see on the inside there is cardboard as well, and you can take out the cardboard from the windows or not, depending on if you want to have the windows opened or closed. As you can see, I went for opened windows because it looks nice. Here we have some of the decoration again, the houses, some trees and fences and things. And the trees mostly still bare, they don't have any foliage, because for Donaldson what was the winter battle, so I thought I would use the trees for now just the way they are and put on some foliage later, so they would look more like a summer tree as you would expect them. But for the winter battle I would just leave them the way they are right now. This is as far as I got with the Union Army right now. So a lot of people here, some colorful people, some cavalry without horses, but well, they are firing at least. Not enough flags still, and I still need some representation for the headquarters and more generals and things, but it's an army. And here's the other team. They are more like two colors. Sometimes they are the bluish gray. The others is what is called the butternut, the homemade dye for their stuff, for the uniforms. Their cavalry has actually some horses, and they have even less generals. Some because I didn't find them, the others because I didn't paint them yet. But again, it is an army. So what did we learn from all this? Well, the Civil War miniatures are challenging in and of itself because they are still very small models, and to make them work and to make them look at least half decent is still a lot of work. On the other hand, you have incredible amounts of dark blue soldiers, and once you are done with those, you have incredible amounts of bluish gray soldiers, or at least beige soldiers, and it's not the most interesting thing to paint all those guys. So that's maybe an issue. That depends on what kind of models you want, how good you want them to be painted, and if you enjoy to spend a lot of time on all the details, because you can still make them look very, very good, because the models are molded in a very nice way. And yeah, it's just if you are able to paint them properly and really good. I am not, as you can see, but well, that depends on what kind of hobbyist you are, I would think. Another good thing about this American army stuff is that those people have more or less decent names. Robert Lee, John Brown, Ulysses Grant. You know, you can live with that. That's no problem. If you look into the Napoleonic era, for example, yeah, well, if you are French, you're well off. Otherwise, you have Jean-Pierre, Jean-Marie, Duc de Bernadotte de I don't know what. And once you got used to those, there is still the Russians, the Italians, the Germans, and so forth. So just to try and talk in a half-educated way about the whole topic is much easier if you are an English speaker, if you stick to the American Civil War. The most exotic guy was probably General Beauregard, and apart from that, everybody has more or less decent English names. So that's a lot easier, I would think. But still, I will try to challenge Napoleon. Say what you will about the American uniforms, the Europeans just look cooler, and they are much more diverse. You have all the colors of the rainbow depending on which nation, which unit. So it's a lot more variety, and because I thought I would just start to build an army or several armies from the Napoleonic era. Because why not?